When we refer to sexual identity, we refer to the sexual orientation of a person. We refer to the reproductive nature of a person. For instance, when we talk of my sexual identity, we talk of my sexual preferences, we talk of my reproductive health, we talk of quite a number of things. Sometimes it includes and involves gender identity and expression, but we need to understand that these issues are quite different. So sexual identity refers to the orientation and preferences of a human being sexually. So gender identity then, or gender expression, then refers to the socially acceptable attributes of a human being. Now you have to understand the difference between gender and sex. When you're talking about sex, you're talking about the physical, biological anatomy of a person. For instance, if we're saying you're a male, would mean that your anatomy, you've got a penis, or maybe doctors can go deeper into your testosterone. And if you're a female, of course, there's the estrogen and there's a vagina. But if you're talking about a man, that is the gender. Now that is attributed to the mental state of a person. The person decides that they are a man, and the person decides that they are a woman. And in most cases, it is attributed to what society expects of that person. For instance, in Swaziland, we say you are a man because you are wearing pants. We say you are a man because you are working in the fields. We say you are a man because growing up you are playing with guns. And we say you are a woman because you are wearing a skirt, you are working in the kitchen. So that is what the society has described to be a man. So this is when then we get to speak about gender identity and gender expression, because there's the gender identity, which is men, and then sometimes there's the expression, which can be feminine or masculinity. But we have to understand also that just because society has framed being a man as being someone who works in the field and being a woman as being someone who works in the kitchen, those roles, those identities can be different when it comes to the individual. For instance, I can come out and say, I'm a woman, and you'll say, no, but you're wearing pants, no, but you work with boys outside, you carry heavy stuff. And I say, my identity is a woman because that is how I feel I am best suited in my role in this society. So that is when then we start speaking of people who are transgender. So we say they are transgender because their gender rather is different from what society expects them to be, number one. Number two, it's different from what their sex is. So then people can go as far as changing even the anatomy, and then they become transsexual because then their sex, which is the male or female, then changes altogether. So it's a very broad spectrum. There is no binary identification of gender expression and gender identity. It can go from X to Y and back to X. It's an open spectrum. Well, sexual orientation goes back to the sexual identity. Sexual orientation is the preference, is the intellectual, spiritual, emotional, and physical attraction that a person feels for one gender or another, for one sex or another, for one human being or another. Examples are heterosexual. That is a sexual orientation. So this is a person who is attracted to the opposite sex. Another example is homosexual. And as the term homo defines itself, this is someone who is attracted to the same sex or the same gender. So sexual orientation, again, is an open-ended spectrum. There are bisexual people, there are homosexual people, there are heterosexual people, there are pansexual people. Bisexual people are those who are attracted or can be attracted to both the same sex or the opposite sex, or the same gender or the opposite gender. For instance, if I'm a male and I'm interested or I'm attracted, the key word there is attraction, and we need to distinguish attraction from the act, which is sexual intercourse. So when we're talking about sexual orientation, we are not talking about the sex as an act, which is sexual intercourse. So we are just merely talking about the attraction. So a bisexual person is someone who is a male who is bisexual, is a man who can be and is attracted to both women and male. It does not have to be at the same time. It can be at the same time. It can be at different times. It's just an issue of attraction. So now when you're talking of men sleeping with other men, now that is a terminology that was coined by the World Health Organization at the UN level, and that was basically for health purposes. We understand that there is a group of people who are called key populations, and these are people who are more at risk based on their everyday behavior. So the World Health Organization says these people are more at risk to the HIV virus, and therefore they are called key populations. So men having sex with men refers to men who have sexual intercourse with other men. So if you're talking about sex as an intercourse, remember I said we should distinguish between attraction and sexual intercourse as an act. Gay men, these are homosexual men who attract to other men. They might have sex with other men. They might not have sex with other men, but they are gay. They attract to other men. But if you're talking about a man who has sex with other men, and you're talking about it from the health perspective, you have to be very careful with that, because we are just talking about men who have sex with other men. You do not know their identity. You do not know their sexual identity, actually, because they could be bisexual. They could be straight but want to experiment, or they could be gay.